Hi, my name's Chris Connor with Franchise Marketing Systems, and during this presentation, we'll talk about franchising your business, how to franchise, and a bit about why companies franchise and what the franchise model is like, and then how the process would work for a company transitioning into franchising. First thing, a little bit of background on us as a company. We've been in business since 2009 and worked with 400 different brands to go through the franchise process, and that's across a wide range of different industries: service, food service, retail, manufacturing. In today's market, sanitization and cleaning are a big category. There's a lot of different areas where franchising is an extremely viable way to grow and scale a company. What started out as really focused on food service, now franchising has become one of the broadest, most prolific distribution channels used by really any industry segment. So Franchise Marketing Systems, we're a team of 27 consultants. We're based in Atlanta, Georgia, but have people really spread out across the country in a lot of different markets. We do everything from planning, strategy, the operations and training documentation needed to teach someone how to run your business and how to effectively become an independent operator. We work through third-party legal counsel to do all of the disclosure documents and franchise registrations and franchise agreements that you need to be able to sell a franchise and sign on a franchisee. Um, our client list are some names that are big names that people recognize, like UPS stores, Subway, Costco. We did a franchise platform for Ford. Lots of brands that are big, global names. But a lot of our brands that we've worked with that are real meat and potatoes of what we do are not names that are necessarily household names. They're companies that we started with one location. We help them get into franchising. We help them develop their franchise platform, and now they've been able to grow to 50 or 100 or 200 units. And we've got a lot of companies that fit that profile and would be good examples of how this whole system can work. So number one, let's talk about ways to raise capital, because every business, doesn't matter who you are or what industry you're in, capital is usually one of the biggest obstacles to our ability to scale and grow, and it's always at the forefront of how do we address this. The first option is usually what you could call bootstrapping, organic growth. You take the profits from the business year one and two and roll it into a new location in a new market year three, and just continue to use the profitability and the cash flow of the business to fund the growth and to capitalize the growth. Probably biggest issue here is that it's slow. It can take a long time to add up the profits from the business to account for the investment it takes to really fund the kind of growth that we'd like to see. And a lot of times the profits that we expected to have at the end of the year aren't there. We had to reinvest in new equipment. We had to hire new people. We had to do a marketing campaign we didn't expect. Coronavirus hit, whatever it might be, and the profits that we thought might be there for business growth are not there at the end of the year. And it ends up becoming still a roadblock for us to scale at any significant pace. The other issue that I find in using organic growth is that you, as the entrepreneur, me as the entrepreneur, we tend to get embedded deeper and deeper into the day-to-day business with more company growth. So with each new restaurant and with each new retail location and each new office that we open up, the day-to-day minutia ends up in our own lap. We're the ones who end up dealing and managing the fires that pop up as we open up company operations. If you haven't read the book The E-Myth by Michael Gerber, always recommend it. It's a basic core principle, but it's 100% true. Very, very difficult to build a business if you're stuck in it. And a lot of times as entrepreneurs, we become the number one employee, and we end up doing hourly wage positions and sort of menial tasks that we get pulled into, and it's impossible to think and act strategically when we're focused on doing these sort of small-time tasks. And with each company location we open up, we exponentially grow those small-time tasks. So I've seen that become one of the bigger issues as well, where companies get bogged down in operational responsibilities and can't scale. Second option for capital raise is to use debt. And this would be going to a bank or a lending institution or a private investor and getting a loan and using that loan as a way to fund new locations and new growth. Biggest issue and the biggest obstacle to overcome here is the payback structure of a loan. A business loan does not always equate to the revenue or the cash flow from a new business. So we typically will have to make payments back to the bank month 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. The cash flow from a new location, if we're in the restaurant business, it might be 2 years before we see any profitability from it. And a lot of companies get over leveraged in debt and end up creating a significant liability for their overall business by extending themselves too far. Third option for raising capital would be going to third-party investors and bringing someone in as an equity investor. And if we've been in business for any length of time, we've probably had interesting or negative situations that have arisen from partnerships, and that's not uncommon. Partnerships are very difficult. They're hard to manage. People's personalities and interests and goals may align at first, and then they change down the road. Once you have let someone into your business, they have a legal right to tell you how to run it. And worst case scenario, the only way to solve and address that fight or conflict is to go to court, and that's never the best answer. So letting people in as equity owners, big liability. Not that partnerships can't work, but when you give up equity, you're giving up a control, and you're giving up. You're letting someone else make leadership decisions, which may not align either now or in the future. So the fourth option is franchising, and most people wouldn't think of it as a way to raise capital, but I'd argue it's exactly what you're doing. You're giving people the right to invest in your company without giving up equity. That's the best part of it. They now can make an investment directly into your business by paying you a franchise fee and a royalty and all of the fees that are associated with your franchise offering. They also invest in the business indirectly by investing in the location and the construction, hiring the people, marketing that business, all the things they have to do in their location locally, which if you opened up that location as a company-owned business, you'd have to invest in. The franchisee now does that for you. So there's both direct and indirect investment made. The second element of franchising that really is one of the most powerful is finding and keeping good human capital is always tough. People have a certain mentality when they're an employee and they don't have their own skin in the game, they don't have a vested interest. But when you put your own money on the table and you've invested in this business and you've refinanced your home, you've closed out your 401k, which a lot of franchisees will do, they are going to put everything on the line. They're going to make sure this thing works. They're going to drive it, they're going to focus on it, and they're going to make sure that every customer that walks in the door has the best possible experience. It's a level of focus and intensity that only an owner can have. The third reason why franchising can be such an effective vehicle for growth is the speed of growth that can be accomplished and achieved. There's a lot of franchise systems that have used franchising and opened up thousands of units in some cases. Orange Theory is a great example of that. Over 1,000 locations in 6 years of franchising. You'd be really hard-pressed to find another growth vehicle that can expand a brand and a business and open up as many physical units in that short of a time period as they've been able to do with franchising. So what comprises a franchise? Number one, it's the use of a common brand. Every franchise location looks, feels, and presents the same way, and they look and feel and present to the consumer as if they were all part of one company. And if you think about any of the big brands, the Jimmy John's, the McDonald's, the Jan Pro Cleanings of the world, as the consumer, you cannot tell which of those locations are owned by corporate and which are owned by an independent operator. That's the idea. And the value in that of building brand equity, building consistency, gives the consumer more confidence and ultimately should raise the performance and sales volume at each location. People prefer to buy from brands they know and trust. That's just human nature. Number two is that all franchises follow the same system. And system is kind of a broad, comprehensive word, but it's the vendors that you use. It's how you provide the service. It's how you prepare the food. It's how you interact with a customer. It's all the things that you do day in and day out, how you manage the business, how you operate, how your employees look, what POS system you're on. That is what the system is, and every franchisee has to follow the same system, same model, and same platform in order to be compliant with their franchise agreement. The third component of a franchise is the payment of a fee, and that initial franchise fee might be $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, but any fee, as long as those three elements, name, system, fee, are in place, that legally needs to be defined as a franchise. Some models go to market as a license offering and others as a business opportunity. A license model, by definition, would be usually where you sell the rights to use your name. You would not teach that buyer, you would not train them, and you certainly would not hold them to any operating standards. They could use your name and they pay a fee for that. A business opportunity is the use of the system, and they come up with their own name. So they buy the training and the teaching and the guidance from you, but they open up their own brand and their own presentation to the consumer. A franchise is the combination of those three elements: name, system, and fee. From a legal perspective, franchising has two layers of compliance. At the federal level, you need to have a franchise disclosure document. Every state requires an FDD, which is basically a two-part disclosure. One is the disclosure presentation, which is meant to explain what the franchise offering is about. It's written in plain English. It has 23 items which disclose every element of the franchise offering: initial investment, fee structure, territory size, background on the leadership behind the franchise, if you've had any lawsuits, if there's been any bankruptcy filings. All those things need to be disclosed in this disclosure document. The second part of the FDD is the franchise agreement, and that is the actual contract. That's what the franchisee signs when they move forward, when they execute the franchise. In this FDD, you have the right as the franchisor to dictate every element of the business: how the franchisee can run the business, how they should build the location, signage, vendors, all of the things that make you successful in day-to-day operations. You will incorporate into this franchise relationship. Most of that I would put into the franchise operations manuals, not the FDD. The reason being that once the FDD is signed, you can't change it. It's an agreement. You cannot change the agreement that was executed. What you can change and alter is the operations manual. That can update, it can evolve, it should evolve. You should change things on a regular basis as the franchisor. You might negotiate better purchase agreements. You might have a new branding creation. You might find new marketing ideas that work. Those are things that should be in the manual, and they can be updated ongoing, and the franchisee has to be compliant with the then current operations manual standards and guidelines. In here, you'll also put things like branding requirements, signage, uniforms, what all their advertisements can look like. All those things would be documented in here. The second level of compliance is the state level. In here, there are different requirements depending on the state. There are three real reasons why you'd have to be registered in a state. Number one is where you're located. Where is your corporate location based? Where are you based as the franchisor? Number two is where is the franchise business going to be located, actually physically located? And number three is where is the buyer a resident of? And any one of these would trigger why you need to be registered with a certain state. There are registration states like California, Washington, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Maryland, Virginia, New York. They are the most comprehensive and detail, heavily regulated franchise states. You have to send in your FDD, you need to have audited financials, all sorts of rules and requirements. Generally speaking, it's not that I've seen too many companies get denied from these states, really ever in 20 years of doing this. But what does happen is they will be more scrutinizing. They'll ask questions. They'll want changes to the disclosure document. They'll have specific terms they'd like to be included. So they'll make alterations to the franchise offering according to their own local state-specific franchise regulations that you have to abide by to sell to someone in Washington and in California and in Illinois. On the one level lower regulatory compliance are the filing states. And these are states like Nebraska, Texas, Florida, the Carolinas. They will not review the franchise offering. They just want to be put on notice. They do have a filing fee, not generally nominal fees, like Texas is $25, Florida is $100. You do have to submit this before you sell to someone in those states. And then there are non-registration states like Georgia, Tennessee, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon that don't have any filing or compliance. They just adhere to the federal rules, which mean you have to have an FDD. You have to present a buyer with an FDD. You have to abide by the Federal Trade Commission guidelines, but there's no state-specific regulations there. All of these can be addressed and managed. It's something that not overly complicated to go through. You just need to make sure you abide by these rules before you sell a franchise to someone. What are the benefits, big picture, to doing this? Number one, franchising allows you to build a brand exponentially quickly. With the right franchisees in place, you now have an independent operator in a local market that they're familiar with, and they should know people. They have relationships to lean on. They have kids that they've raised in that market. They know people in that market, and it gives you an immediate advantage as a brand. In the franchise agreement, you now can require them to spend a certain amount of money locally to promote the brand. You also can have a marketing fund requirement, which requires that every franchisee contributes money back to you. You then reinvest in that brand in more global exposure. Think TV or Super Bowl commercials or PR endorsements by a big celebrity or something. They are things that each individual unit probably couldn't justify doing, but now because you're a group, you're buying together, you're leveraging the economies of scale that come from being under the same brand. Now you can do these really big picture initiatives, and it benefits everyone. Franchisees generally have a higher rate of success than company-owned locations, and the reason comes back to that owner-operator. When you get the right vested operator who is focused on running this business, they have their own money on the table, they're going to make sure that business is successful just because it's their own baby. And they'll work the hours, they'll do the right things, they'll focus on driving it, and they'll execute the model as well as anyone could because they do own it, and it's their money on the table. Franchising allows us to scale a business quickly, and a lot of, I'd say last but not least, a lot of people don't realize the exit opportunity that's created through franchising. Franchising has a much higher multiple when it comes to valuing what the business is worth than traditional company-owned businesses do. And what I mean is that if I go to sell my company and I own my consulting business, I own my service business, and my net profit per year is $100,000 a year, generally I could sell my business for maybe 2 times my net profit. So my business is worth $200,000 because I net 100, multiply that times 2. In a franchise business, franchise systems will sell for as much as 10, 15. I've had a handful of brands that have sold for 23 times earnings. The reason you can get that kind of a multiple is you have proven through independent ownership that the business is not reliant on you as the owner. And that's our biggest problem as an owner-operator, as an entrepreneur. is the value in the business is tied to us personally, which lowers the value of the business if we go to sell it. So franchising allows us to prove that the value of this business is in the systems, it's in the brand, it's in the way we do business, and it's in the model. That's how this business increases its value to a third-party owner, because they know they don't lose all that opportunity because we don't go with it. In a franchise sale, when I sell the company, the franchisees that are tied in through those franchise agreements go with it. So they get these independent operators that are now focused on running the business and driving the business, and the new buyer doesn't have to figure that out. So as a franchise company, how do you make money? Number one, you charge a franchise fee anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000. These fees will go up to maybe $70,000, $75,000. They will pay that fee. A buyer will pay that fee to you just for the rights to use your name, your system, and get your guidance and support. Beyond that, they need to make the investment in the business to start it. Once they're open, they then pay a royalty percentage of anywhere from 4 to 15% of gross sales. That percentage would be collected weekly or monthly, depending on how you set up your structure, and it is paid for the ongoing right to use your brand and your system. Depending on the industry and depending on your margins is usually how we'll set those numbers. After the royalty percentage, you also will charge a marketing fund fee, which could be anywhere from 1 to 3% of gross sales. It will be collected at the same time you collect royalty payments. That money has to be kept separate, and you'll use that to promote the brand and develop the overall promotions of the organization. And again, that goes back to bigger buying power and promotions that you can do now because you have the buying power of the group. Some franchisors will also sell products to franchisees, and you can have a margin on those. You can't mark it up as if you're selling retail. You'd sell it now as a wholesaler, because the franchisee has to resell the product at the retail level and still have margin. But completely fine to do that, and the franchisee would have to buy from you as long as you define that up front in the franchise agreement. So things that we look for in whether a business is franchisable. Number one, you need to have a good business model in place already. It's very difficult to franchise a business that you haven't proven. You need to make sure this works and that it is consistent. What you do is needed. There's a market for what you do outside of your local market. You need to have some element of a profitable working prototype, one that we could show to a buyer and use as the reference point that, hey, we figured this thing out. We know it. We understand this model, and that's why we could justify you paying us a fee, because we're going to teach this model to you. We're going to show you how to run it. We're going to teach you, and we're going to use our own experience as the basis for why we tell you what we'll tell you. We need to make sure that there's systems in place. What we do cannot be reliant just on you as the entrepreneur. A franchisee generally will come into business without having any background. They won't know the industry. They won't know the business. We need to make sure that there's systems, technology, and processes in place that we can use to transfer that IP, transfer that intellectual property, and help someone become successful doing this. These are things that we can help you create. These are things that we would help you document. But a lot of the time it's just spending the time to pull that knowledge out of the entrepreneur's head and getting it onto paper and getting it into a format that we could teach, train, and show other people how to do what you do successfully. All of these are things that we can help you go through. And I've been doing this work now for almost 20 years and been in the franchise development industry helping companies franchise since 2002. I started Franchise Marketing Systems in 2009. Our process that we go through, we begin with initial analysis, consultation, no cost, no obligation. We'd love to speak with you, find out more about the business. Happy to sign NDAs. We'd like to get to know more about the company, and we'll give you our feedback, tell you whether we think there's an opportunity there. Once we do begin an engagement, we would go through a process where we evaluate the model. We do a feasibility study to really look at the market and understand how big of the potential, how big potential is the potential here in franchising this model? What should the franchise model look like? Fee structures, royalties, territory sizing, buyer profile, all the things that we need to define and make sure work, not only from your perspective as the franchisor, but also from the franchisee's perspective. Can they make enough money? Can they realize a return on investment in order to justify this investment in the franchise business? And if those numbers make sense, more people will invest, and the franchise will have the opportunity to flourish. Once we've gone through that, we then begin the planning process of putting together our go-to-market. How do we sell this? How do we promote it? And how do we execute a franchise offering that can work and has viability and there's opportunity behind? We also will conduct market research. Once we've completed the planning, we then begin on the legal document development. Again, we work through a third-party law firm to do this. They will be your legal representation in putting together the FDD, the franchise agreements, and handling all the registrations that you have to go through to do it. And then we will work with you to create the operations, the training, and all of the documentation you need to teach and show third-party franchisees how to run this business. And that obviously can be a bit of a painstaking process, but we make it as easy as possible. Time on site at your location, a lot of questionnaires, a lot of interviewing. It's a process we've done for a long time, so we can make it as efficient as possible. Once we've completed the operations work, we then do all of the marketing programming, and these are things like the brochures, the application forms, the marketing plan, our sales presentation documents, our PowerPoint presentations, our franchise website, everything that we will use to be able to present and sell and promote the franchise as an offering, we'll put together and organize. We've got a great graphic design team, a great marketing team, and we can help do all these pieces and organize these pieces so that we have something that is attractive and ultimately will help sell franchises. The thing that sets us apart in the industry and makes us unique in the franchise development space is that we will also work with you to sell and promote and market and do the things that it takes to find franchisees and execute this whole process. So in a lot of ways, it looks and feels like a partnership, and we want that. I think that's why we've had as much success as we've had over the last 20 years, and I'm confident that that's a big reason why the brands we've worked with have been able to effectively implement this franchise model and begin scaling through it. For more information, visit our website, www.fmsfranchise.com, www.fmsfranchise.com. We'd love to hear from you. Again, consultation, discussion, all these things we do a lot of before there's any kind of commitment and any kind of financial engagement. We look forward to hearing from you, and thank you very much for spending the time to go through this presentation, and hope to hear from you.